Well, let's get started by just talking a little bit about how you got, not how you got here today, but how you got to this place in your life. So you grew up in Canada?
Yep, now
right?
we're east of Toronto.
And where'd you go to school?
Went to school called Dartmouth College.
Yeah.
It's an awesome school.
Anybody know Dartmouth? Somebody's got to do a shout out. And tell us how your path led you to here.
So yeah, I grew up in a really small town east of Toronto, and I think I was looking for a school that also had a small town feel. So Dartmouth felt right for me. And when I entered Dartmouth in '89 as a freshman, it was one of a very small number of schools that standardized on Macs, and everybody had email when they came in. I'm sure Stanford was probably at that stage too. But because of the ubiquity of Macs in the undergrad population, there's a pretty steady pipeline of undergrads that got recruited out to Apple. So I had an opportunity to work as an intern at Apple in the summer '92, and then. My first job at Dartmouth was working in the dining hall, to help pay down the student debt. And it certainly was a much more fun job when Apple sent me back with a bunch of computers to write code for them. So I did that my senior year and then came back out here full time when I graduated in '93. I wasn't, founding a company until many years after I got to the Bay Area.
Well, so 20 years ago you came this way.
Yeah.
Did you ever think you'd be here today as CEO of New Relic and having started another company that was sold successfully? I mean, what did you think you'd be 20 years later?
Oh, I mean, you have dreams, but then, you also have doubts and all sorts of things. No, I don't. I certainly, I didn't think I belonged as a student. I had serious imposter syndrome, so. Yeah. So no, I never imagined.
So you saw yourself as an engineer, but then how did you all of a sudden start a company? This is Wiley, and then.
So I founded a company called Wiley Technology.
How did that happen from being an engineer?
So I've loved building software ever since I discovered my first computer, and that was in my parents gave me a computer in '82. It had 3 kilobytes of RAM. So what is that? Like 1/1000th of a single MP3 song. But I discovered what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I mean, the joy of creating software was just something I couldn't resist doing. So it was easy for me to pick a major at Dartmouth, although I also minored in Latin and classical studies, and I guess that kind of is part of the story might be that I had a broad set of interests, and I wasn't just, I loved the art side of creating software, not just the science side of it. So I couldn't believe that I could get paid to do this, to write code and build software. And so it was an easy yes to come out here and work for Apple.
That's a really significant point, because we celebrate that here at Stanford. I think we use the term humanist engineer.
Yeah.
I mean, there is this dichotomy saying, well, you're either an engineer or a humanist, and you can't be both. Do you agree with that? Or
No, I think the very best engineers really do have an instinct for what people want and empathy for the end user. Even if you're just designing something like an API, there's someone who is using that API. And so that's why I think liberal arts educations are great for developing the whole set of skills that are involved in building great software. And of course, you need to learn how to work with people too if you're working on a team, no matter what your role is. So I'm a big believer in that.
All right. So Wiley. So all of a sudden you're a founder of a company.
Yeah. So I had an interest in startups and thought I'd love to get involved in a startup and tried many ideas as mental exercises. But in December of '97, an idea hit me that I really just hit me like a ton of bricks. And it's a very technical idea, but the idea was at that time, Java was this new technology that was very early in its adoption, but I was a huge fan of Java and thought it could be transformational to how people built software. And today, Java is by far the #1 programming language for modern software, but at that time it was viewed as this toy. And the idea I had was, what if I could make Java software self-diagnostic? What if I could make any Java application report about itself while it runs, so that whoever built or ran that software could understand how it's performing in production and fix problems in production. So that idea was the genesis of a company that I founded called Wiley Technology in '98. And long story short, that was a wonderful learning experience. I had no management experience when I started the company, so I was learning a ton on the job, but it grew to about 350 employees, about 55 million in revenues, and it was acquired in '06 for 375 million by CA. And that company created a category of software called application performance management. So it was a wonderful experience and a great, great outcome for all the stakeholders, but I learned a ton along the way.
Well, we have a laugh about this on occasion. A Harvard Business School wrote a case about his experience at Wiley, and it's super popular. It's taught at a number of business schools. It's taught in all kinds of schools here at Stanford, and even within here in the engineering school, I suspect that many of you will end up doing that case at some point, because I can think of, besides myself, I can think of 2 or 3 other professors who use that as one of the anchor tenets of their courses, and so it's always a kick to teach it. There's so many angles in the case. First of all, it was about what lessons you've learned about leadership. I mean, to go from being a inventor, person who pursues patents, to all of a sudden creating a whole company around it, and what it means to become a CEO of such a thing. That's a thread. Yeah,
the guts of the story was the transition from me as founding CEO to, we decided to bring on a professional who had, with management experience that could lead the company to the next stage, and it really gets into the emotional side of what's it like to give up the CEO role, but you're still very connected to your company and you want it to succeed, and trying to find the right person. I learned an enormous amount in that process. And to jump to a point that I think is worth dwelling on, like the difference between, now I am serving as CEO of New Relic, and New Relic is my second company. In many ways, I think of it as, if I didn't sell Wiley and were to do it all over again, what would I do to try to make a company that could last decades or longer, as an independent company that had a real impact? And that company's New Relic. But the question is, having had 2 runs at this, one as founder CEO to about 50 employees, and one running it through to this point at least.
How many people is New Relic at?
600.
600 today?
600 today, up from about 375 in January. It's just like, I'm far beyond the ability to memorize the names and all that stuff, so I'm always like, hey, how's it going? I should know your name, but I know you work for me. Anyway, I think the biggest change for me personally was my first time around, I really felt compelled as CEO to be more of a domain expert in everything, and to, in effect, try to be someone I'm not. I felt like, I had this image of what a CEO should do, how they should spend their time, and how they should behave, and I tried to make myself fit that mold, and it was a terrible mistake. I'm not one to sit in quarterly review meetings or pipeline review meetings, or to drill through the financials. I have a great appreciation for all those things, but at the end of the day, I love building products, and I love I love recruiting amazing people to join me on the journey. And so this time around, I was very thoughtful about how I spent my time and how I defined my role, and I was very, very proactive on recruiting incredibly senior, capable people that could be CEOs of other companies to do the parts of my CEO job that I don't want to do. For example, I have a table in my office. It has 6 chairs around it. If there's a meeting that can't fit around that table, I don't go to it, because I'm not one to go to meetings. I'd rather be building software, or I'd rather be making decisions. And I found if I'm in a group meeting with 20 people, I'm either, if I say anything, I'm going to overweight the meeting, and if I don't participate, then I've just got too short an attention span to actually stay engaged in the meeting. So I have really smart people that run the larger meetings. But do other parts of, like, leading the company that I'm not passionate about, not particularly good at.
So I want to follow this thread, but I want to give people a context. I want to explain just how impressive New Relic is. But go to the website. It's fine. Just bring it up and look at the numbers we're talking about. So what do you do at New
We're
Relic?
a software analytics company. So what does that mean? We collect billions of metrics from live software applications to tell the people who build software and run software what it's doing, how it's running, what people are doing to make that software better. So the most profound example of us, having an impact was late last November when healthcare.gov was having those front page news challenges, just keeping the site running. They had no idea what was going on or why the site was down so often and so slow. New Relic was called in, and within a week, the software we provided told hundreds of people working on healthcare.gov exactly what they needed to do to fix it. And immediately the response times went down, the site availability went up, and people could get health insurance.
Yeah.
But we do that for over 10,000 companies, companies like Airbnb and Nike and Disney and New York Times, and it just spans virtually every vertical. But if you think about every business is a software business.
Yeah.
So every business needs to make sure their software works, and that's what we do. Is we help them make sure their software delights their customers.
Yeah, I saw something on the site, getting ready for this, about data. That it's, I forget the tagline, but I forget it now.
We're all data nerds.
Yeah, data nerds. Yeah, they had two meanings to me. I know it's about data, but also about culture, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that we wanted to do at New Relic was celebrate the builders of software. So in my first company at Wiley, the software developers as a constituent, the conventional wisdom was you don't want to sell to that crew. They have small budgets and not that much influence. But if you think about where the world is going today, the people who build the software are really the people who are changing the world in many ways. And so we want to build a product that an army of people love and use. And so over 300,000 developers have used our product this year. And they're an incredible, they're a hard crowd to please, because since they build software for a living, it's kind of like if you're an actor and your entire audience is actors, they can sort of pick all the little things that might be wrong with the software. But if you do please them, they're a very loyal bunch, and they self-reference. So we celebrate the data nerds, and so we've got these data nerd T-shirts we give out for people to try the software, and a campaign. And if you just think about it, data is basically fundamental to every business decision, and the data we collect is from the guts of the software, and that's the guts of your business. So we think there's a massive opportunity there.
So now that you've gotten to know him a little bit, I get to ask him this question: where did the name New Relic come from?
So I had a prototype and an idea, and I thought it was time to start, put a company around this, and not knowing whether or not it would become a real company, but I needed to incorporate. So on short notice, I had to come up with a name, and I didn't have any bright ideas. So I just typed my name, Lew Cirne, in an anagram builder, and you can Google anagram builders and type your own name in. And,
why don't you do that now?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Your name of your company someday.
I think another anagram of my name is Ren Lice or something like that.
Ren Lice would be a pretty good name.
That's not quite got the same.
No,
ring to it.
New Relic. So I waited for you to get to know him a little bit before I asked that, because I always get a kick out of that piece of information, is that he's so humble. He's also audacious. He's really audacious. You want to make New Relic a huge company.
Yeah, I mean,
you're not just hoping somebody buys you someday. You're doing this for a whole other thing.
Then what would I do? My wife would just kick me out again to start another company because I'd drive her crazy. I built one company and sold it, and I have no regrets how that went. But because I talked about my role and how I spend my time, I've thoughtfully tried to design my role in my company so that I love my Mondays so much, and my employees love their Mondays so much, there's nothing we'd rather be doing. I think this is one of the problems with a lot of the companies in Silicon Valley. They think, look, you can put up with a job you don't like for a few years because it'll all work out in the end when these options might be worth something, and then we can start living the life we want to live. I think that's just the wrong way to look at it. I think we should sort of, basically, if you structure your work life so you're doing what you love and you're doing with people you admire and respect and love, then why would you want to do anything else?
Yeah.
And so this is the last job I ever want to have, and I want to be doing it for a lot longer. I love to build software. I still get to do that. I'm doing it but I love building,
Where did this philosophy come from, though? What did that motivate? Was that something from your parents, or was it something you just have developed over your professional life? I mean, it seems simple on one level, but
I don't know, it's just, I guess it's common sense that, in life so many times, if all you're doing is chasing the outcome rather than really focusing on, why what you do matters. Yeah. So the outcome might be some financial goal is the only reason it matters. I mean, like, who really gets excited about that?
Right.
And by the way, those companies where the only reason why people come in and work on a Monday is because there's some pot of gold at the other end, and that's the only thing keeping them in the company. Those companies don't weather storms very well, right? And startups will have to weather storms. Mm-hmm. It was just this thoughtful, approach of New Relic's, currently at a point where it's generated more for my family than we'll ever need. So it's not about that. It's about what can we do to build a company that makes hopefully thousands of employees love their Mondays, makes our customers successful with the software they run, and just helps me personally continue to learn and grow.
Yeah, well, let's jump in. Thank you for that, and because it sounds simple, but I don't understand why it's not practiced more. And that's
we live in a place where it's pretty seductive to just look at the shallow things. The shallow things. I mean, like, it's not that. But just the easy to describe things like share price.
Yeah.
Right. And just don't let that take your eye off the ball. Like, you got to ask the question, why are you doing what you're doing?
Well, so having with my wonderful colleagues built out an entrepreneurship and innovation education center in the engineering school, we come from the engineering mindset. Mm-hmm. So I think we share that common background. But then it isn't just about the money. It's about changing, and in some cases, saving the world.
Well, and I don't want us to put ourselves on too high a pedestal, but I have been deeply thoughtful about, why does what New Relic do matters? I mean, we make software a little bit faster, right? So it's taken a while to really think deeply on it, but here's my best answer to it. I think the most precious thing we have on this planet is time. The most precious thing we all have is time. And thank you for spending some time in this room. But it's possible to make more money. It's not possible to create more time. Right. And so people spend young people spend up to 6 hours a day in front of software. So if you think about managing that time, making the most of that time, life's too short for bad software. Life's too short for crappy software. And that's why when you wait 6 seconds for that page to load, it seems like the mother of all first world problems. Why are you so frustrated during those 6 seconds when it should take just a couple seconds? But I think it's because during that 6 seconds when there's nothing you can do but wait, you're just sitting there saying, you're wasting my time, and that's my most precious thing, right? And then, but it's not only just is it slow, it's like there's nothing more frustrating to me than like you're on that website, you're about to fill out the form, you type in all the fields, you click submit, and then the next page comes out and says, oh, you didn't fill this one thing, you didn't put dashes in the phone number, and then the whole form is empty, you got to redo it. The website just wasted your most precious asset, your time, right? So New Relic's mission is to help give people more precious moments in front of their software, and hopefully even time away from the software, more time with your family or something like that, instead of waiting around for bad software. So that's why what we think we do matters.
Well, something comes to that's excellent, and we got some good sound bites out of that, didn't we?
Yeah.
I know the editorial team's loving that. The mother of all software, or the first
mother of all first world problems.
I love that. Well, let's go to strategy for a minute.
Yeah.
So, because I've heard this has come up in class before when you've come by. It's not just you celebrate innovation in technology, which I want to talk about, but also innovation in the business models on the business side of things. And so New Relic is an instance of that.
So my last company had to sell. Well, it didn't have to sell, but it made sense to sell my last company at in 2006, and I thought deeply on why that was, and it really came down to the business model. That was a traditional enterprise software companies, license and maintenance enterprise software companies. You can spend 9, 12 months with the customer, and then they sign up for a very large check. And basically, it's very hard to predict when that customer is going to say yes, and usually after they say yes, it's another 90 days before you actually get a contract out of them. So anyway, that's a really painful business model to execute to, because it's hard to predict what the revenues, and it's very expensive to build out that field presence. So when I started New Relic, I didn't want to be purely dependent on just enterprise business, and I didn't want it to be a licensed business where it was very lumpy, because it's really, it's hard to sleep at night if you don't know whether or not, especially in the last 7 days of the quarter, where like 70% of revenues could come in, and those are paying salaries, right? So I wanted a subscription business. I wanted a business where, how do you reach the whole market? And the way you do that, I think, in business software is you have to build a product that's so simple, so easy to use, that the customer can see the value without the help of a salesperson. And there's a lot of effort that has to go into the design and thought about the onboarding process that may seem obvious to folks in this room because of all the great consumer products you use, but it's actually pretty rare in enterprise software. So if you design a product with the business model in mind, it can really just it can reduce your distribution costs, because now we give out a T-shirt with Data Nerd on it, and somebody tries it out and they fall in love and they want to become a customer. That compresses our sales cycle dramatically. Mm-hmm. Now we do have an enterprise business as well that does have that traditional sales model, but it's great to have that balanced subscription business of small companies. And that business model was by design, but it started with the product being engineered for the business model. You can't just glue the business model you want to a product that isn't well suited to it. And that's why I think the incumbents are having trouble sort of being successful in the SaaS world. The products aren't engineered for the kind of business model that I was just describing.
You mind if I ask a little bit about operations? One would be.
I'm not a domain expert. You can try.
Or about the the other side. So you took on venture capital this time.
Yeah.
Given your success with Wiley in the network, you could have stayed with friends and family, or why take on traditional venture capital and even make one of them the chairman of your firm, Peter Fenton from Benchmark. He's the chairman of your firm.
He is, and
why do that?
He's my best friend. I couldn't respect anyone more as a business partner, as a person, than Peter. When I started New Relic, I really didn't know if it had the potential to be a company that really made sense for venture funding. I was thinking maybe this is just a little business that aspires to have maybe 5 million in annual subscriptions, and maybe we have half a dozen employees that all just kind of check email and all the checks rolled in. That was an interesting concept, and Peter completely disillusioned me of that by saying, no, there's an opportunity to build a great company. By the way, that idea you have is it's not going to be you just sitting in and waiting for the checks to come in. You're going to be carrying the pager, and you're going to be having a much harder life than you imagined. So Peter's remarkably good at helping people aspire to greatness and do their very best, their full potential, and that's over a glass of very nice wine. He and I talked about building a great company together in late 2007, early 2008. For those of you who don't know, I think Peter's routinely in the top 3 to 4 on the Midas list. I think he's just, without question, one of the greatest venture capitalists in the world. And
why do you say that? When a venture capitalist is more than just the money, what is it that he provides?
Well, I think one of the things is he knows how to inspire entrepreneurs to reach higher, and he does it in a way that is all about, you can do this. It's inspirational is the right word I use. He'll challenge me, but he'll always support me as a founder. And my litmus test for working with investors is, if you're lucky enough to have term sheets from a few investors, what's more important than the terms are the likelihood that you're going to have a really open and honest relationship and a high trust relationship with that investor. And so if you're looking at a term sheet, what I'd recommend you do is give yourself a gut check and ask, is this individual someone that I feel I could come to very comfortably with bad news? Because you will no doubt have bad days, bad weeks, bad news to share with your investors if you're going through the startup ride. Everybody does. So the question is, are you going to feel hesitant? You're going to kind of shape the message to make sure that they don't overreact or whatever? Are they going to get too just difficult to work with, or are they going to be collaborative and help you solve whatever problem needs to be solved? That gut check, Peter resonates very well with that, and I'm also blessed to have Dan Skolnick is another great board member on my team. I mean, I've just got great investors, but
they almost feel like co-founders. I mean, given that you were a solo co-founder,
Yeah.
which is unusual.
Well, they certainly,
in the data.
you know,
They almost become, you say he's the best friend, that almost sounds like a co-founder.
they feel like, deep partners that, I can be completely open and vulnerable with. So,
Yeah.
and the interesting thing about it is, I feel like it works better for their relationship with me too, because people are smart. They know when they're being played or managed, or like, someone's trying to represent themselves as being someone they're not. And there's temptation to do that when you feel like you got to defend yourself, or you don't have that level of trust with a person. But when you're completely open and vulnerable with your investors, they draw themselves in and really want to help you too, and help you grow and your company succeeds. So it has this kind of symbiotic relationship. And I'd say the same thing with how you work with your senior team as well.
Well, that caught me my eye. I've got a couple of things, and then we'll open up a general Q&A. The other one is that you are known, at least on Wikipedia,
Source of all
and we
truth.
all know, yeah, exactly, as the coding CEO. That's
Yeah.
like a cartoon character.
Yeah.
The coding CEO who still finds time to actively involved. I mean, there was one post by someone that said you code on Thursdays and Fridays.
Well,
You still do that?
so let me tell you the story behind this. So I remember I had a meeting with Peter Fenton, spring of 12 or so, and I was like, he's on the board of Twitter. I'm like, how on earth does Jack Dorsey, at the time he was very active with both Twitter and Square, running both. And I said, how does he manage his time? And he said, and he gave me some guidance. And so it starts with just thinking deeply of what do you love to do that you think can really move the needle for your company? And then after you allocate your time accordingly to line up with how can you be most effective with your time allocation, then make sure you've got the team to complement where you're not focusing your time. But anyway, for me, I love building software, and I love creating stuff. And I wouldn't want it to be interpreted that like, the only new ideas come from me or anything like that. We've got amazing engineers that are capable of building amazing software, but I'm less grumpy when I'm writing code. My wife always says when I come back from a coding retreat, I'm a little happier, a little more, sometimes a little zoned out because I'm just so deep in the zone of whatever I'm trying to create. But it does bring me back to the strategic discussions, I think, with a different perspective. I'm a little bit more, I don't get as mired in the details and things like that. So anyway, how I allocate the time is I try 4 to 6 times a year to have a full uninterrupted week of code. I do it in a remote place. Sometimes I have to explain to my poor daughter, Caitlin, over here that Daddy's going to somewhere like Cabo San Lucas, and I bring a laptop and a screen, and I write code for a week, and I come back with a prototype, and the poor engineers need to somehow take that and figure out how to make a product out of it. Hey, goofball. So anyway, and I try to do that 4 to 6 times a year. And the thing about it is, why do I do this? Well, my rationale for it is, most software companies go through this arc where the original idea the company was founded on has a high growth curve. The company brings in mature management, and they kind of get good at distributing and selling and growing the top line. And you build this engine that gets really good at that. But it's very hard for the company to come up with a second act, a new fundamental idea that's totally new and disruptive, that goes beyond the first idea. In fact, I don't think there's more than 5 companies that have really done it well. Apple obviously did it very well. Microsoft did it well, going from the OS to applications back in the 90s. Oracle, you could argue, did it when they went from the database to apps. Now, what all those companies have in common is led by founder, very product focused, and the founder was so obsessed on product that, I created the next product in January of 12 in my cabin in Tahoe, and I'm very obsessed on it, and so that's our next act, and we think it's 10 times bigger than our current act. So I'm not saying it's gonna happen like 100%, but I believe it will. And more importantly, I believe that we want to create the culture where we're never just kind of satisfied with what we've created in the past. We care about we just don't want to be, a Nokia.
Are you a nerd?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, because I ask, because if you go to the site and you see that in this part of the site that talks about the company culture,
Yeah.
the atmosphere and and the philosophies of what it's like to work at New Relic. There's a celebration of the nerd. I think you mentioned it. We're
Yeah.
dad and nerds.
Yeah.
So it reflects you. I mean, I
A
think
bit,
these
but
retreat-
yeah, there is like, we certainly love, we love creating software. We love, we love, people who really just do incredible things with their minds,
Yeah.
right? But I'd say the other thing that's kind of important about our culture is this focus on, there's a warmth to the culture of our company. I hear this every time people kind of visit the company, like, just how they get treated by no matter who they bump into and they come across. And I think that's the thing I want the culture most to be known for is like, people love working at New Relic or interacting with New Relic because the people are sincere. And I just, as we grow, I feel like that's going to be important to preserve and make sure the culture is a place where, there's a warmth and honesty and integrity to the company.
Wow, thank you. I think that's a good way or a good point to segue to questions from the audience. Let's do this for a little bit. What did we not cover that you'd like to hear something about or to amplify something perhaps that we did? Right here.
So in your experience, can you share the benefits and drawbacks of being a founder versus a co-founder?
Can you repeat the question?
So the question was, can I share the benefits or contrast being a founder versus a co-founder? Well, I've been sole founder of both my companies. And in some ways it's harder, in some ways it's easier, obviously. I mean, it's when you're sole founder, it's very lonely. In my first company, I was in a little one-bedroom apartment in Santa Cruz, but fortunately it was like, when I really got just overwhelmed, I'd walk out and stare at the ocean and recognize how much more there was to the world than whatever I was worried about. But the sole founder thing, the reason why I'm a sole founder, I think, is I always draw these analogies between creating software companies and creating music. And the reason why I run off to go code is kind of like a musician that just feels like they've got one more album in them, right? And so I'm like a singer-songwriter. I write the music and I perform it, right? And there are better virtuoso musicians that can play the piano better than I might be able to play, right? Or as like pure engineers that really are up to speed on algorithms or something. But because I'm writing the stuff that I'm conceiving of, and I'm doing that kind of in that kind of very isolated early stage, I think there's just something in the product that is harder to get. Now, the other analogy is Lennon and McCartney, right? So there are these duos that create incredible products. And I have a partner. My CTO is somebody that I go to every time I have an idea, and he's my my soundboard, and the person that he's very good at telling me no and doing it in a way that makes me feel like, boy, is he ever right. So I do have that, but I just like at the very beginning just kind of be just like writing a novel alone, the hermit in the woods kind of thing, without going crazy, hopefully. So. Question
in the very back.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the other speakers in the series, Talib, presented to us that he thought there should be a National Entrepreneurs Day, especially Engineering Entrepreneurs Days, because the tinkerers that add value this way, they add tremendous value to society, but they also take great risks and frequently fail. So I wonder if you can talk about how the innovation and the risk associated with those innovations in your firm dovetails with a society that can be kind of hard on failure, how that works inside your community and New Relic, and how it works between New Relic and other firms.
It's a good question. I feel like, as a society, we can't help but probably put too much emphasis on the folks that happen to be fortunate enough to have success. And it's the same, but you look at that think of how many people are playing minor league ball that never, had their one at bat in the majors or whatever, right? You can look in almost any domain and just sort of see that, and that's kind of natural. If there is any celebrating going on for entrepreneurship or anything like that, it should be for I think the joy of creating stuff. I'm a huge fan, by the way, of code.org and just getting Hardy Partovi's project to get, I think they're on their way to 100 million people learning how to code. And in particular, getting...
Explain who they are. Just a little bit.
So code.org is this remarkable project that anybody can learn how to code in an hour. And in particular, and I think this is really important, getting more girls excited about coding at a young age. There's not enough women in software, and I really think that ought to change. And the best way I know how to do it is to get girls at a young age to do it. And so I remember Christmas of last year, my daughter and her 3 friends were at my cabin in Tahoe. It was 3 days after Christmas. There's a room full of presents, and there's 4 girls fighting over 3 computers because they all want to learn how to code on code.org, and that was the coolest thing ever. So, encourage young girls, well, young people, or anybody to go to code.org and just learn a bit more of that. And that's what I'd like to celebrate.
Yeah. Good. There's somebody in the middle here. Did you?
Oh yeah, I was curious if you could talk a little bit about long-term strategy in this mobile enterprise space, and then like a sub-question related to that. Looking at your product, I was curious whether you're going to go by way of like a marketplace, kind of like Salesforce, where people can integrate into your product, or have people learn the New Relic query language?
Oh, very good question.
Can you restate that just in case?
Yeah, I hope I'm going to answer the question the way what you're looking for, but you're asking about our long-term business strategy, in particular about how, are we going to have people build applications on top of our big database technology, or is there going to be a marketplace or something like that, and how does mobile fit into it? So let me spend a little bit of time on this thing that I created in the Tahoe cabin a year ago. 2.5, nearly 2 years ago now I started it. Totally don't invent, not invented here. I reinvented the wheel, but I created a big data database from scratch. But I wanted to do something that was high performance, tuned for real-time analytics. And existing database technologies were a little too generic, and so they couldn't do a billion event query in under a second on any attribute. So that's what we built. And the power of this is that since we're collecting all this data from software in real time, we can answer questions like, how many people under 15 are looking at an item right now that signed up last week? All those kind of business questions that you want to know about what's going on in your software. And the cool thing is we've got this cloud database that you don't need to do anything. Just shove the data in. You don't need to worry about indexing or configuring anything like that. The point is, this is a very powerful technology upon which we're in not even the first inning of. We've got this $40 billion big data analytics opportunity, and we've got a really differentiated technology. My vision is, at the moment, and I'm working on it, but I think our best path forward is to make a platform out of that where our customers can build applications on it in the cloud. So if you want to build an application for your support organization to help support reps understand what the end customer's experience is for a specific user, you can build that app on top of the New Relic data application platform. You can do it for salespeople, for marketing people inside your org. My ultimate vision is I want every knowledge worker to be a New Relic data nerd using our analytics products. So going beyond just the software developers and the people who build software to everybody who has something to contribute as a knowledge worker using the big data analytics that New Relic provides.
Right here.
So most recently you raised a lot of money from private equity. Why did you do that instead of like the typical route, which is VC then IPO?
Right. So the question was, we recently raised a large round, and it was private equity. Actually, the investors in that round are large institutional funds that typically invest in public companies. So Fidelity and T. Rowe Price and BlackRock, these are folks that typically invest in public companies. And what we found is, or what they've been seeing is, for certain occasions, rarely they'll go into some private companies that they see have potential to be big important companies, and they'll kind of break their rule about being only public investors. And New Relic has aspirations to be an independent company for the long term. And so what we wanted to do was have an investor base that feel like they're just at the beginning of their journey with New Relic. Unlike, and I believe my venture investors when they say they're long New Relic too. But venture funds are structured so that they're in private companies. So we wanted to bring in people who think of New Relic as, this very early stage company that they want to participate in for a very long period of time. And so we went out to, the top tier public market investors, and we were lucky enough to put together a good round. So that was a $100 million round we closed last spring. And our aspiration is to be a public company, but that's just a step along the journey.
Right here.
Would it be possible to get into the early days of the founding of your first company? How did you get going? How did you get the capital or the
Sure.
resources?
So the question is, tell me about the early days of my first company. That company
Also,
was...
it's talked a good bit about in this book by our friend Professor Wasserman at Harvard.
Yeah.
But give us the headlines.
Yeah, the early days of Wiley, as I said, I was an engineer. I hadn't desired to start a company. And I was a Java developer, and I was stuck with this problem of my Java software worked in my local environment, but every time I ran it in a remote environment, it was broken, and I didn't know why. And so I'm driving down Highway 17 to my little apartment in Santa Cruz, and I'm thinking, how do I solve this problem for myself? And this idea of something called bytecode instrumentation, a way to modify the Java program without the person who built the software needing to do anything. Another program could make that software self-diagnostic. And I was so excited about that idea, being the nerd that I am, that I almost drove off the road on 17. That would have been an early end to, there would be no ETL in 2014. So anyway, by the time I made it to Santa Cruz, I said, I want to start a company. Problem was, I was not from a family of means. I had no money, but I was only 28 years old, and so, there wasn't much to lose. So I called up my parents, and they didn't have any capital to invest, but they had 7 friends who each were willing to put $5,000 in. So within about a week, I had $35,000 of committed capital. Well, that was infinite funds as far as I am concerned. I could live forever on it. So I said, of course I'll quit my day job. What's the downside? There's none. So I started Wiley. I worked on it. I remember Christmas Day, my parents ripping me away from the computer because I just about got the prototype working there. Come on, it's Christmas dinner, Lew. And so I said, all right, if this progress bar makes it across the end, then it works. And so that's how it got started. And it turned into $100,000 of first funding from people like the headmaster of my high school and other sort of they all made out really well, by the way. I didn't hire my first employee for a full year. Nobody would fund me because first of all, this was '98, so I wasn't doing shoelaces.com or anything that was like public internet. And like anything public internet could fund it, but something like I've got Java bytecode instrumentation technology and no capability to talk about that as a business. Nobody wanted to fund that. But that was good because the bubble burst in 2000, and I hadn't raised much money, so we didn't have a burn rate or anything like that, and we kind of just got into our stride and raised our first significant round in 2000, and then we were well positioned to actually build a business.
Look, I'm watching the clock because I know
I got a flight to catch.
Yeah, you have a flight to catch.
Yeah, but we got one or two
How
more
about
questions.
one more over here?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask more about the culture and hiring. You talked about like warmth and kindness, and you talked about like not wanting like people who only care about like the pot of gold at the end and things like that. How did you make that culture, and how did you balance that with wanting to hire strong, like being competitive in hiring?
Yeah. The question was about the culture and building a warm culture. How do you go about building that? And of course, you want to build a competitive company, and you want to win in your marketplace. And certainly those are important things to New Relic as well. I think it's the same life skills. It's just how do you choose your friends, right? How do you get to know people, and you're like, do I want to spend time with them? We talk about like one litmus test is, could you imagine hopping in a car with this person driving to LA? Would you enjoy that road trip, or would you be like, get me out of the car, right? So. I was fortunate enough early on in both my companies to hire people I had deep respect with. I thought they were gifted, but I thought they brought out the best in me. But I wanted to spend time with them. So, you never want kind of a marriage of convenience where it's like, you've got skills I need. I've got, a company that can help make you wealthy. Let's work together. If that's how you're making it happen, then don't do it. Right? Work with people that's going to bring out the best in you. There are going to be dark days. There are going to be challenging days. You want people that you're in it with together. And then you just keep investing in them. The other thing I would say that I don't think people do enough of is they think of recruiting as, all right, get someone to say yes, get them to join your company, then focus your recruiting time on the next person. Keep recruiting your people after they come in. What I mean by that is check in on them 3 months after they've joined. Is the company, like, are you loving your job? Are you loving your Mondays? Is this turning out the way you hoped? Is it better than you hoped? What is about it that you like? What can we do to keep the company special for people, right? So you want people to feel valued, right? Everybody wants to feel valued, no matter what you do. If you're a support rep, if you're in finance, if you're in marketing, you want to feel like what you do matters. And if you feel like what you do matters, then it turns out you're pretty nice to other people, all right? So it's all kind of this, it's all intertwined.
Please join me in thanking Lew.
Thank you.